Greetings and welcome back, everybody, to the final of our preliminary rounds for the 500p Reassembly tournament. This is, of course, Group Th. We have Kabuto by Kaien no Kage, or Kabuto, sorry, I believe I'm putting the emphasis on the wrong part of the word. We've got Saccard by Soul Sphere, Fatal Spike by Eld Drones, we have Sword by Rinthalion, the Drone Ship by Camo5, and Arrow Tip by Hagoromo. Now then, as you can see, the vast majority of these ships, in fact pretty much all of them, are up towards the upper levels of the tournament's allowance for points. Most of them, well actually only 3 of them are 550, but 2 are 548 and 1 is 542. So let's start the pool and see how these high point ships do. First up is Saccard versus the Arrow Tip. Let's see how you do. Okay, the Saccard is just keeping pace, using its lasers to slowly burrow through the front of the Arrow Tip. The Arrow Tip lacks the forward thrusters to really get close enough to do any damage at all. It looks like it's primarily based on just having enormous amounts of armor, a decent bit of thrust, and a couple of guns. So the whole thing is this. The idea behind this ship, I imagine, is that it's a brawler. It gets in close, it does a lot of damage, it can survive a lot of damage. But Soul Sphere wins the round because as much damage as the Arrow Tip can no doubt do, Soul Sphere can just keep ahead of it. It never has to engage that ship on even grounds. Now, the Kabuto. We've got a very interesting looking ship here. Shielded on the front, and it looks like it's using basic lasers. Very nice indeed. But again, the Saccard is remarkably good at just keeping away from the fight. So as fantastic as the Kabuto looks, I don't think it's going to be able to do this. No, I think it's going to be exactly the same thing. It looks like Saccard is just going to stay well ahead of the competition. It has put almost everything into maneuverability and thrusters and just a couple of burst lasers to do the killing for it. It's going to come down entirely to points. I know that we can't really see the fight there when I speed it up that much. Unfortunately, the camera seems to try and predict where the action is going to be a little bit too aggressively. But now, let's see. This one seems to have enough long range on it that it can actually fight back. How long it's going to be able to survive, I'm not sure. The Saccard is fantastic at dodging. It's not having any of it. Wow, well played. And stole one of his thrusters. Just to add insult to injury there. This is a fantastically well-designed bot. The fact that it can dodge with such ease is honestly quite impressive. It's got an equal amount of thrust on all of it, well, its cardinal directions and a little bit on the diagonals, but what a fantastically agile little craft. And it's getting a couple of shots in here and there, though obviously if it stays that far away for too long, then it's going to give the Fatal Spike a tiny chance to recover some points here. But we may be looking, if there's nothing that can take this ship down, we may be looking at a winner for this group. Because it is just happy to dodge, get a bit of damage in early, make sure it's got enough points, and then just stay out of the way. Now, the Camo5 drone ship. Let's see how this one does. I believe this one is a multi-faction ship. It is using the Borg laser drones by the looks of it. The Saccard not doing too badly, and now it's in close, and the the drone ship 550 is taking a lot of damage there. But the Saccard is focusing its weapons mostly on the drones, or was for a little while. Two very agile ships, both kind of similarly designed, honestly, though the Saccard has got more emphasis on its directional thrusters, that is its forward, back, left, right. Whereas the drone ship has a more even balance with all of its thrusters, so its maneuvering thrusters have just as much priority with it. The Saccard has only put a small amount of thrust on the very corners of its bot. Now, in terms of points, the drone ship is currently winning, and if the Saccard can't close the distance and get in a couple of good hits, then the drone ship is going to move forward. Let's see whether the Saccard can get in close enough. No, the drone ship doesn't want any of that, and these laser drones are doing a chunk of damage to the Saccard. We may be seeing a ship that can actually challenge this dominant force in this group so far. Okay, now it all comes down to this. As we've seen, if Sakaad can get a good first engagement, it stands the chance of winning. It needs to fire those lasers and take out the thrusters. It has done that. It may be in a position to win. There we are. Sakaad knocks out the drone ship. That is a bit of a surprise. I was expecting the drone ship to do a lot better, but then again, this ship is absolutely dominating right now. Though, how is it going to manage against missiles? Ooh, it realizes that the threat is a very different sort this time, and is getting in close and personal to try and wipe out those weapons before it's too late. Has it managed to do enough damage? I don't know. Those missiles are coming in thick and fast. The sword may stand a chance. It is overwhelming the Sakaad with long-range firepower. It can't focus on all of these things at once. It has very minimal point defense capabilities. It looks like it may have met its match. We'll have to see. But the sword is no slouch when it comes to just regular damage as well. It's not just its missiles that it's using here. It is doing a very, very convincing job with its main guns as well. But, interestingly, the Sakaad is ahead on points right now. So unless the sword can do a lot more damage with those missiles or get a kill, I fear it may all be for naught. Let's see what you can do. We'll have it at 2 times speed for now. Sword has done a bit of damage. The thrusters are damaged. Now's your chance if you can't get in there quickly. And at the very last moment there, it got in and took out the Sakaad. Well done, Sword. Well done indeed. Let's see if you can do a similar repeat of that performance. You losing your thrusters on the back, though. That's not going to be good for you. Not at all. Your main guns doing a very good job of taking out the shields. And there we go. Just a almost point-blank volley from its main cannons. Well, Sakaad met its only opponent capable of withstanding its enormous firepower at range. Now, arrow tip versus Kabuto. Alright, let's see how this one goes. A very long fight. That is... the arrow tip is doing remarkably well. If it can hold on for long enough, it may even be able to wear through those shields. And it is. Wow. You came so close. That was a really tough battle there for Kabuto. That was a really hard battle. I wasn't sure who was going to win that one, I'll be honest. But it does seem that the greater survivability of the arrowhead made all the difference in that one. And is it going to play out much the same way? It may do, though. The positioning this time has meant that the Kabuto has been able to do a staggering amount of damage and almost burrow to one of its main weapons. It may be able to get to the cockpit in time. I'm not sure. Yes, it did. Very close, that one. The Kabuto was almost ready to lose one of its final arm. And if the damage can be applied to those clusters of 3 lasers right towards the edges of the arm, it seems to disconnect the whole thing. It all comes down to that, yes. And this time I think the arrowhead has it. I don't think the Kabuto is going to be able to recover from this. We'll have to see. If they keep dancing, maybe. But on points alone, then the arrow tip is going to win. There we are. Well done, arrow tip. Well done indeed. Okay, you're now up against the Fatal Spike. Let's see how this one plays out. Well, there's not going to be any convenient way for you to lock against the Fatal Spike, but it doesn't look like you have to, because the Fatal Spike wants to fight you front on like this. They're both brawlers of a sort. Those huge weapons at the back of the Fatal Spike may be able to do some damage, but the arrow tip is just doing amazingly well. Amazingly well. Okay, well, let's see how this goes. The Fatal Spike in a death spiral now. I don't think it's coming back from this one. No, now the arrow tip is close enough to unleash its fairly overwhelming firepower, honestly. Once those guns all start firing, it does seem to do it a whole lot of damage very, very quickly. But I'm not sure. Well, maybe. No, I was thinking that perhaps the Fatal Spike would be able to recover from that. It seemed to be doing okay. But no, I think it's gone. And now, once again, into the death spiral. That's it for the Fatal Spike, I fancy. Alas, the arrow tip is going to chase you down, either kill you or win by points. One or the other, your fate has been sealed, it would seem. The arrow tip is having a little bit of trouble getting in close enough, though. Fatal Spike is going to make him work for his victory. Well done, Fatal Spike. You dance off into the distance there. Oh, actually... Fatal Spike won? Was I reading something incorrectly there? Oh dear. I thought that this was all over. I do apologize, everyone. I'm going to have to watch the replay to find out what happened there. Whether it was the first match that I got wrong or the second. But either way, the arrow tip does move forward. Now, up against the drone ship. Let's see how this one plays out. Okay, those drones are quite powerful, but they're going to have a hard time against the flak and that incredible armor. But will the arrow tip ever get close enough to do damage? Well, it's actually catching up. If it can just get a couple of hits with its flak, it may well win. It's locked on now, tunnel visioned. It's ignoring the laser drones. This may be the end of it. Yes, it is. Okay, let's see how it goes this time. Once it was zeroed in, it was just chasing down, and that was probably the best thing that it could do, honestly. But it just didn't have enough thrust to catch up with the drone ship when it really wanted to get away. The drone ship is basically just teasing it. It's literally helping its drones by staying just close enough that the arrow tip thinks it's got a chance. And the drones can slowly cut away the arrow tip's hull. Okay, final matchup. The arrow tip versus the sword. Archery versus swordplay. I'm interested in how this is going to play out. Oh, huge amounts of damage, though. Look at those spiky bits there. Well done, Kai no Kage. Sorry, Rinthalion, I do apologize. No, it does actually appear that the sword is trying to stay far enough away there that the arrow tip isn't able to properly bring its weapons to bear. An interesting engagement, but I mean, it's got the range, but the flak on the arrowhead is going to easily be able to deal with the missiles at any range other than if the sword is just near enough that the arrow tip is trying to primary the sword instead. I'm not sure if it's going to be able to win this, but it might come down to points, honestly. This is very close. I thought the arrow tip actually had it for a moment there, but it looks like the sword may actually be able to pull this back. Well done, sword. Let's see how you do. Every time you get a little bit close, the arrow tip absolutely wrecks face, though. And it gains so many points when it does that. It is going to go down to points, but it is going to go in the favor of the arrow tip, it seems. It was close, though. The arrow tip almost wiped out sword with a kill there. But unless the sword is near enough to distract the arrow tips, I believe they're flak guns, then I don't think its missiles are going to be able to take it out. And honestly, I don't think the sword can handle the arrow tip in close quarters, which is ironic, really. The sword, its only chance is to engage the arrow tip at long range. That's fantastic. You couldn't have planned it that way. But well done, arrow tip. You did remarkably well there. 3 wins. Okay, Kabuto against the Fatal Spike. Let's see how these ships do. Now, Kabuto doesn't really want to get too close because there's an awful lot of Daka on the Fatal Spike, but at the same time, Kabuto's armor is doing remarkably well at deflecting most of it. Kabuto is actually doing fantastically well, I must confess, and it looks so good as well. The armor on its limbs, whether for aesthetics or actually serving a purpose in trying to absorb damage or not, are fantastic. I absolutely adore them. I love the look of the Kabuto, regardless of whether it does very well. It just has an awesome aesthetic to it. But it looks like the Fatal Spike is controlling this battle handedly. It's dominating whenever there is an actual engagement, and it is basically dictating how this battle is going to be played out. The Kabuto, all it can do is try to stay away. But it looks like it has actually gone in close, and I fancy if the Fatal Spike wants to finish this, it probably could, but I think it's happy playing with its food. Oh well. I mean, you know, I can't blame it too much, but still, it's not particularly dapper. But there we are. It's almost disconnected. Yeah, it's disconnected both limbs. That is the primary weakness of the Kabuto, is that when those two limbs are disconnected, that's it. Everything is gone. And they're basically held together by weapons that are more or less in the direct line of fire. If it's any kind of weapon with splash, then those lasers are going to go down. Now let's see how the Kabuto does against the drone ship. Are these laser drones going to be able to do much damage to it? They're actually dancing around. The point defense is pretty good, unless they get stuck on the front, in which case they just get torn asunder. Let's speed things up, not slow them down. And we'll see how this does. The drone ship will win on points as it stands, but if the Kabuto can get close enough, it may be able to take out the drone ship. I'm not sure if it's going to, though. Maybe, or it really, really wants to. Again, the drone ship is doing fantastically well at just basically staying close enough to its enemy to have all of the weapons trained on it rather than its drones, but never close enough for the weapons to actually hit. And I find that fantastically clever planning. If that indeed was an intentional design goal, absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. I wouldn't put it past Camo 5 to have designed it with that in mind, I'll be honest. And it seems to be working fantastically well. Now, against the sword, how will the Kabuto do? I'm not sure, honestly, because that heavy shielding at the front is probably going to be good enough to take a couple of volleys, and if it can get close enough to the sword, it may be able to cleave off some important systems. But the sword has an awful lot of defensive kind of prongs at the front of the ship, so it's quite possible that it would be able to survive long enough to disconnect the limbs. But at the moment, it's mostly a ranged battle. Oh no, there we are. Wow, the worst part of your ship to point towards the Kabuto. Your thrusters. Still, you've done a fantastic amount of damage, all the same. But you're not really burrowing through the armor as it stands. Honestly, this is almost a stalemate, I would say. Well, I guess with enough time, the sword would probably work its way through the Kabuto. But the Kabuto really would make it work for its victory. But as it stands, it's just going to go down to points 5,130 to sword and a win. Right, let's have a look at how this one does. The enormous missile volleys early on really do help get rid of that shield, it seems. I wasn't actually sure that missiles interacted with shields. I thought they punctured through, but clearly I was wrong, or at least it certainly looks that way, staring at this. But those lasers did a convincing amount of damage to the thrusters. Though that said, there are so many forward thrusters on the limbs of the sword that it doesn't actually matter too much if the rear takes a heavy amount of damage. The only thing that would really hurt it is the fact that the cockpit is closer to the back. That's also where its missile launchers are as well. But I fancy this is probably going to play out in much the same way it did before. The sword is already up to 4,000, 5,000 points. The Kabuto only at 1,200, and the sword moves forward. Okay, we have got Fatal Spike versus the sword. Let's see how this one does. Okay, Fatal Spike versus the drone ship. I apologize. Right, it looks like Fatal Spike is more than capable of dealing with the drones. Though they are getting a couple of hits off with their laser beams, and those lasers really do hurt. You don't want to give them too much of a chance to gang up, because they will strip apart subsystems fairly easily. But in this one, I think it's just going to come down to thrust, and the drone ship has significantly more. So it's going to come down to points in the end. The drone ship is just going to continually launch its drones. The drones are doing quite well. Actually, the drones got a kill. Well done, drones. But those lasers are impossibly powerful. They are absolutely deadly. Slow down just a tad. We'll see how this goes. But I think it's probably going to play out much the same way. The Fatal Spike will do its best to try and dissuade the drones where it can, but without ever being able to get close enough to the drone ship to actually deal any damage to the launcher, it's never going to win the fight against the drones. It's going to be a war of attrition that it is bound to lose. We'll watch for any large damage being done to the hull of the sword. Actually, on this time, the drones did not kill the sword. It just came down to points. But we've got the Fatal Spike moving up against the Rinthalion. We'll have to see, the sword, sorry, by Rinthalion. We'll have to see how this one goes. Now, Fatal Spike does have some pretty hefty firepower in those two large guns at the back, but whether it's going to be able to get the sort of hits that it needs to disable the sword. The sword is, even when it's taken staggering amounts of system damage, really still quite a dangerous combatant. You can't take the sword lightly. Even when half the ship seems to be gone, it's still doing massive amounts of damage and still able to move around quite well. It's a fairly large vehicle, and it spread out its thrusters across the entire perimeter of the craft, which does give it certain advantages. Gives it much more survivability, I suppose I should say, in terms of its locomotion. And I haven't seen it spin out too much either, so it's fairly well balanced. I'm actually genuinely quite impressed with the sword's design. It's doing really, really well. But is it going to do well enough? I think, that said, I think the sword is going to win on points here, and Fatal Spike starting to spin out. It was a reasonable engagement. Fairly lacking in action. It was mostly just strafing runs and long-range attacks. The sword's missile systems really do it well. They're really earning their rent, if you like. But that said, the Fatal Spike, on the instances where it's managed to get its big guns to actually connect with its target, has done a very convincing amount of damage. But I went to the sword. Now it's all down to which of the sword and the drone ship is going to win. Does the sword have enough speed? It seems to. It seems to have enough speed that it can get in close enough. It's almost outrunning its missiles. That is how fast the sword is. But is that going to be enough? It's gaining, or it appears to be. Those drones are also causing a little bit of concern for it. But I don't think it's got the speed it's going to need to be able to keep up with the drone ship. Interestingly, those drones that the drone ship is launching are really actually getting a chance to attack. They are a little bit. In all this time, the drone ship has only earned just over 400 points so far. Let's speed things up and see how this chase continues. But wait a minute. Those missiles are getting very close. They might actually connect. No, not quite. There was a possibility there for the sword to at least get a couple of points, but doesn't seem to have worked out that way. The drone ship is just too fast, and it all comes down to running away. The drone ship fights by allowing its minions to do the fighting for it, which is a wise thing to do when you're a mothership like this. But those instances where it decides to change direction, the sword had a small window of opportunity there. Right, well, it comes down then to the drone ship versus the Saccard. Now, of the two, this is actually a really tough choice because the ships are so similar in so many ways. The drone ship uses drones to quite solid effect, honestly. It generally stays completely outside of the reach of its opponents and slowly whittles them down with drones using laser beams, whereas the Saccard generally stays just out of the reach of its opponent and slowly whittles it down with laser beams. This is a tough one because both ships have a very similar aesthetic, but I think at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Saccard. I'm going to put Saccard forward with this one. And the reason for that is that the Saccard itself got a bit more involved in the combat. Also, I believe that when the Saccard and the drone ship fought, the Saccard was the winner. I feel that the Saccard did more to earn its victories, whereas the drone ship mostly just stayed away, just ran away and allowed its minions to do the work. And again, that's a completely valid tactic. As a drone ship, you don't really want to be in the fight, but there was a bit more to the Saccard, and I'll be honest, I find the colour scheme a little bit better as well. That did not feature significantly in my decision-making process, however. It did. The symmetry of the Saccard did feature fairly heavily. However, I will put that forward. But on the whole, I'm putting Saccard forward mostly for how it performed in those battles. So there we are. The winner of Group Saccard goes forward to join the Rogue Wind, the WSFF Spearhead, the Apoaptic Anomaly, the Thorfish, and Harbinger's Beetle in the final. I do hope you're looking forward to that, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. But until then, and as always, Do take care.